Coming up, in case you didn't realize, the New York Football Giants are 5-1 following a massive win at home over the Baltimore Ravens. We take a look at that game, as we will all week, but also ask the question, is this now an NFL team capable of contending in the playoffs? Yes, friends, it's OGP, the One Giant Podcast, where we are your hosts. Over here, Adam Armbrecht, breaking down the Brooklyn Nets and the Locked On Nets podcast, and yonder there, the healthy, wealthy, and wise, the season generational ticket holder, the elated New York Football Giants fan, Mr. Andrew Makowitz. How are we, sir?
I mean, this team just does all the right things to find a way to win, Adam. It is unbelievable. Like every single game, it feels like it's Groundhog Day, doesn't it? The Giants inexplicably get down. In any other year, you're basically like, okay, this game is probably over. But the resiliency, and I think you even mentioned it, all three phases of the game yesterday, the Giants were executing at a high level, and they put themselves in a position to win. They got that win against Lamar Jackson, the Ravens, yesterday. Unbelievable.
You better believe it, man. Yeah, I came on for that post-game reaction, talked a lot about how there were areas of this game, Duvernay for the Baltimore Ravens could have been a real problem. Instead, when you come out the back end of it, it's that Gary Brightwell has a big return. And I thought the Scottish Hammer did a really good job of placement punting, not just bombing them out there and maybe giving some big opportunities. Overall, was there any, just before we get into, because the question of the day, I think to me is what is this team then, right? Because they're 5-1 now. So at a certain point, you can't turn off what they've accomplished. You look around the landscape of the NFL, we see that there are teams that were supposed to be better. And right now, they're not. I want to get into that question, but just at a high level, were there any key things that you really just liked? Just moments that you loved from yesterday's game? Because I took some time on those yesterday, and you deserve your time in the sun too.
Well, we could talk about the offense and how when they needed to execute plays, they did it well. That's a very simple one. It's like even I know it gets overstated a lot, but even just the coaching and the understanding in the huddle, Saquon, all we need is a first down to ice this game away. You don't have to go in the end zone. I know it's going to cost you 7 points, but we will walk away with a win. And you ask the coach, you ask Daniel Jones, Saquon Barkley after the game. They're all like, yep, we knew exactly what we needed to do. We talked about it all week. We talked about it in the huddle. We talked about it right before the snap. Like we talked about it ad nauseum. Preparation of this team seems to be so much different, Adam.
Now it did hurt my fantasy league, but I'm not gonna begrudge Saquon that. It was fast, I will say, like really smart play given that you're up 4. So if you score there, you're gonna be up 11. There's almost no chance that the rate, you give them some chance where you actually gave them 0 chance by going down. But that was, it was an impressive moment because easily you could have said, and by the way, when we look back at this game, we can make the statement like, hey, the Giants could have scored over 30 points on offense, right? Instead, they made the smart football play, and they obviously give themselves the victory formation, something that they've now done several weeks in a row. And obviously, I mentioned it a little bit. We can come back to it during the week. This is now another instance when whether or not these quarterbacks are having the best seasons of their careers or if they're in what we consider to be, their form, now, Daniel Jones has gone up against Aaron Rodgers. He played better in that game than Aaron Rodgers did. He went up against Lamar Jackson. And as we highlighted yesterday, I'm going to keep highlighting the risk reward of what you think Daniel Jones could do, the mistakes he could make, the play calling they're having in their form, a little conservative, whatever it may be. Lamar Jackson's the one that made the mistake, right? Fumble botched. He scrambles around and then inexplicably just throws one up. And it's finally Julian Love and the Giants defense that gets that interception. So all those key moments, to your point, are the ones that are going the Giants' way. Years past, wasn't even an option. Wasn't even an opportunity for those plays to be on the table because the Giants were usually down by so much that there wasn't even a risk being taken by the opposition.
Just to add on one more thing on Daniel Jones, I want to get to the defense. Here's a crazy stat for you. The Giants are 5-1. Daniel Jones has had either a better quarterback rating or passer rating than the opposing quarterback in all 5 of their wins, and he had neither of them against the Dallas Cowboys when he was running for his life, and Cooper Rush outplayed him. Daniel Jones has basically outplayed the opposing quarterback. Now, they don't go against each other head to head, but he's doing more for his team to be in a chance to win than Lamar Jackson did yesterday. Then you just mentioned Aaron Rodgers. Then, Ryan Tannehill week 1. He is doing what he needs to do for them to be in a position to win.
We have to mention Baker Mayfield. I don't care about him.
Yeah.
But and to your point though, even inside of that, right? Because the defensive side of the ball, this is why I'm always saying, like, these are team wins because everyone is pulling their weight. Everyone is serving their role. The defense is making life hard for opposing quarterbacks. Combine that with some growing consistent play from Daniel Jones, right? Like, I'm very comfortable saying the last 2 games, Daniel Jones has been a key part of the Giants winning these football games. And it hasn't just been, well, let's just lean on Saquon Barkley, right? Dealing with the shoulder injury. Defensively, there were points in this game. I said it over on Twitter. There were points when I wasn't sure if the coaching staff was having the same little touch of magic that they had weeks prior. It was like midway through the third quarter. The opening drive wasn't very good. It was quick 3 and out. Daniel Jones looked a little bit twitchy back there, took the sack, kind of stepping up, and, like he looked a little out of place. There was this little moment of, ooh, maybe we're just not going to quite get there in this game. And yet they rounded themselves in the form. And I think in a lot of ways, the Kayvon Thibodeau strip fumble there on Lamar Jackson that effectively seals this one, that was the culmination of the entire effort of that game on the defensive side, because Thibodeau was close. He was close a lot of times, and he finally gets home, and it mattered. Like, getting that finally, we always talk about with Leonard Williams, right? Sacks aren't the end all be all. You can impact the game in a lot of different ways, but for Kayvon Thibodeau, like, that is the way that he impacts the game. Get to the quarterback, get home, force a fumble. What a great moment for him. Little victory salsa afterwards as well.
They interviewed Dexter Lawrence, obviously, after the game and asked him about the team performance. It
Monster reps for him. Monster reps for him the last 3 weeks.
Yeah, Dan Duggan highlighted that he's had over 90% of the snap counts in the last 3 weeks, and they've needed every snap of Dexter Lawrence being out there. They asked Dexter, what do you do against a guy like Lamar Jackson? Like, what was your preparation? And basically he said, we have to get as much pressure as humanly possible. We know he's going to break a run through the A gap. We know he's shifty and he's going to get out there. It's impossible to stop him getting 1 or 2 of those big plays, but the more pressure we put on him, the more uncomfortable he is in the pocket passing the ball. And you saw they just continued to get pressure. And even Lamar Jackson having to scramble outside a few times. Yeah, he made a couple throws. Yeah, he made a couple of plays with his legs. But ultimately, it's the reason why Kayvon Thibodeau comes up with that massive play at the end of the game, popping the ball out for the fumble, and the Giants recover. The defense just continued in the second half to be relentless against Lamar, and it paid off.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because I don't. This requires a lot of tape study. I think, like, a lot of film study, maybe some things that are a little bit above, my eye test and things like that. But there's been now weeks where, because you go back and you look at the stat lines inside of this game, where Kenyon Drake is running, as we all knew, Kenyon Drake was going to be a nightmare for the New York Football Giants. We all had that one written down. I'm sure everyone got their bets in for that one there. But he's having a heck of a game, carving up the Giants defense. They make the switch away from Dobbins. They go with a guy that's faster, shifty, or speedy, or looks like a really fresh player out there for them. And yet, when you go inside the box score, I saw this yesterday, there's 32 pass attempts for Lamar Jackson. He completes 210 yards, 6.6 clip, has the interception, has the fumble, comes out with a QBR, actually, though, of 58.5. So if we just want to talk about, it still wasn't a bad game by QBR metrics for him. Even with a couple of key moments, that's how good you could argue that Lamar was in a lot of other ways. But a lot of that has to do with the running game, and 10 carries for Kenyon Drake for 119 yards, 7 carries for Lamar Jackson for 77. Now, we mentioned Dobbins, 7 for 16, not doing anything. But even with his 7 trash carries, you're still only at 24 rushing attempts, 32 pass attempts. So, something has to be going on here where, unless these teams just continue to not believe that the Giants secondary is good enough. And I get why. They have a lot of injuries, there's a lot of holes there. But if that's the philosophy, multiple weeks now, where they keep saying, you know what, we're going to pass it more. We're going to pass it more. Even though all the sample size says the Giants are the most suspect against the run game, teams keep coming in and going, maybe it's time we air that bad boy out. What do you say? So I don't know if it's doing favors. I don't know if Wink Martindale and the Giants are doing things well to disguise the different looks and maybe convince or trick teams into thinking, hey, let's audible to a pass play here. But just another example of where the game script, especially in the second half, seems to go in the favor of the Giants.
Yeah, it doesn't really make sense to your point, Adam. The Giants are giving up almost 145 yards a game on the ground, which is bottom 5 in the league. And obviously we know Leonard Williams wasn't there for quite a bit of it.
Yeah,
He is a
yeah, yeah.
huge piece of that. But again, they're bottom 5 in those metrics. They're around 10th or 11th in most passing metrics in the league. And it's like, it's contrary to what you think. Everyone's like, oh, they're depleted. They're thin at cornerback and safety. Let's just throw over the top of them, when the Giants have consistently shown that they give up chunk plays in the run game. It doesn't make sense why they keep going away from it. The Packers fell suspect to this too, and Aaron Rodgers couldn't throw himself out of London. And so, like, to me, it's baffling why these teams keep making these decisions. But again, it comes down to coaching, scheme, game plan, and execution, and the Giants are nailing every single one of them right now.
100%. Shout out to Marty, to Tyrone over in the YouTube. Shout out to Henry as well, joining us in the morning here on a Monday, little victory Monday for the New York Football Giants. Yeah, I don't know what it is. A big part of it, I think, too, is going for those deep passes, those plays over the top. Julian Love with a great swat in the end zone. I think that those have been areas that opposing quarterbacks keep trying to go deep, as opposed to maybe taking care of some things underneath where there have been some opportunities. We can worry about maybe where some of the weaknesses are for this team on another day, but it does come then to this question that I wanted to pose to you today, because I'm riding high. We're buzzing. We got the Jacksonville Jaguars. That's great. We got the Seattle Seahawks, and then we get the bye week. So, we're a couple of games away from maybe being a 7-1 team midway through this season. And I know that this is going to come. I'll be curious to see how this comes off, because the question is, like, are the New York Football Giants contenders? Like, right now, 6 games into the season, 5-1. You look around the NFC, basically everything outside of the NFC East and the top 3 teams in the NFC East is a bit of a muddled mess. You have no idea what these other divisions look like or who's going to come up big here. Do you look at this Giants football team and say, contenders, put us in the playoffs, watch your backs, we're coming for you?
So this is a really tough question, because I have the first thing that I thought about, I was messaging with my cousin just late last night, watching the end of the Yankee game, feeling good about all the New York feels here. And I basically said, this is a playoff team. And he's like, well, you're putting the cart before the horse. And I'm like, not really, because like right now at 5-1, like they could go under. They could go under 500 and still make the playoffs from here on out, right? Like,
so yeah, we can let's start. So let's go 2-phase, right?
Right.
Playoff wise, the Giants are 5-1. We know Dallas lost to the Eagles last night. The one time when a Philadelphia win isn't a terrible thing for the Giants. But when you look around the rest of this, we talk about three wild card spots. Because that's where the Giants currently are. They can still contend for the division, obviously. But Green Bay is a 3-3 team. Atlanta is a 3-3 team, and the Rams are a 3-3 team. So the Giants are effectively 2 games up, holding that number 1 wild card spot. And then, so over the next 3 weeks, if they can hold serve on a couple of these opportunities, it's going to be hard for some of these other teams to come over top of them. And ultimately, for the Giants to hold on to the third wild card spot even, is a very achievable goal. So I think playoff wise, it would be at this moment a massive disappointment if the Giants don't make the playoffs this season.
Yeah, that's my point. They could go 5-6 the rest of the way, and they end up with 10 wins, right? Like that's or 5-5. It's not inconceivable.
Whatever the math is, they could play 17, 18, maybe
it's
20
like 17, 18 games. When's the bye week? Is there 2 bye weeks this year, Adam? I don't really remember. But that first question is, do you expect the Giants to make the playoffs? My answer is I absolutely do. At this point, the metrics certainly back it up. You mentioned the games that are looking ahead for the Giants. You mentioned the Jaguars. You mentioned the Seahawks. They get the bye week to get everybody healthy, and they come back and they get the Texans and the Lions. So, like, when you're talking about that 4-game stretch, the way this team's playing, you would expect them to go 3-1. I mean, even 2-2 puts you at 7-3. Like, you're feeling pretty good with 2 games against the Commanders on the back end of this thing, Adam. So I start there in my mind saying there's enough wins left on the board, even if this team regresses slightly from here on out, they still will have enough to at least get one of those wild card spots.
Yeah, and you just mentioned there the next 4 games with a bye week smack in the middle of it, 2-2. Even if you lose a game, listen, it's any given Sunday, right? Then you're 7-3. You have 7 games to play, and even if you went 3-4, you still get to 10 wins. And when you look at the landscape of the league, the NFC at least, you feel like very comfortable being a 10-win team making the playoffs. On top of that, I'll also add in that like what I'm excited for is if we're looking at the NFC right now, and this would be a great barometer, and then we'll talk contenders here, is that the Dallas Cowboys are going to get back Dak Prescott here, in spite of a game that looked like it was going to be, maybe the Dallas Cowboys a little out over their skis. They came back last night. They made a game of that with Cooper Rush at quarterback, had a lot of early mistakes, but the Eagles win that one. Over the back end of this season, we know following that Lions game, it'll start by going to Dallas, then home for Washington and for Philly, then at Washington, on the road for the Vikings, at home for the Colts, and then finishing the season in Philadelphia. But the bottom line being 1, 2, 3, 4 straight games after that week 11 game against Detroit against the division. This season, this division is going to get decided over the final 6-7 weeks of the year. Right. Like there's no way. And here's why it's also big too. And I was looking at this last night. So we might as well, let's have a little bit of fun here. When you go and look, by the way, at let's say that, and this is why these next couple of games are very critical for the New York Football Giants. Go look at the Dallas Cowboys schedule, because they're going to go ahead after losing to Philadelphia. Guess what? They're home for 2 more games before their bye week, and that's against Detroit and against Chicago. Very winnable games against those 2 teams. And then whatever you may think of them, they get Green Bay on the road coming out of the bye. But at a minimum, you would think Dallas is going to try to get right here over these next 2 games and potentially win both of them. Philadelphia, still undefeated right now. Look at their schedule. They're going to get a home game against the Pittsburgh Steelers, a road game against the Houston Texans, and then a home game against the Washington Commanders before they'll get into the Colts, the Packers, and the Titans. But the next 3 games for them, all very winnable. So in that regard, while we talk about 2-2 being acceptable over these next 4 games, the Giants need to do everything they can to stack up these wins if they want to stay in contention for the NFC East, which they very much are right now.
Yeah, that was a really good breakdown, because it is important based on, the NFC East is all playing the same teams that are playing in terms of the Lions and the Texans and all these different teams. So I completely appreciate that. One thing that I just thought about, which I'm thinking way too far ahead right now, Adam, you're going to
get over your skis, buddy.
I'm way over my skis right now in my mind. But what I find fascinating is week 17 against the Eagles. Based on the Eagles' schedule and what's going on, like they may have the 1 seed already wrapped up before the last game of the season, where like they won't even need to do anything.
Oh, dirty talk, brother. I'm sorry. You're saying the New York Football Giants can't be playing for the division in the final week of the season? Come on now.
Well, it depends. The Eagles have to lose a game before that to make it a reality.
Yeah, and you know where they can lose 1 game before then? Against the New York Football Giants at home. Come on.
Agreed. But I'm just saying.
I do know what you mean. Yes.
The way Philadelphia is looking, it looks like they're going to be comfortably in the playoffs at minimum. Just something that my mind went to. Now, you asked the question, are the Giants contenders? Here's where I have a challenge. The answer I would say is yes, because any team that can run the football and is well coached and makes good decisions will always be in every football game. Like that is a baseline standard. The issue is when you look at all the advanced metrics for the Giants, the only thing that they do well is run the football. They don't pass it at a high rate. Obviously, Daniel Jones has good completion percentage. He's 9th in the league, but he's not accumulating yards. He doesn't necessarily cripple teams with his air raid attack. And on the defensive side of the ball, you mentioned we do give up big chunk plays in the run game. And so the only thing we can hang our hat on is we stay competitive in these games. We have the ability to run the football, and we make other teams make the stupid mistake at the end of the game. So any team that can run the football, my short answer is yes, but we really need to start seeing some more progression in some of these other key areas in order to feel confident going into Philadelphia or wherever in a playoff situation.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because the combined, so 9 and then throw in the Baltimore Ravens, going to get you to 12. 12 wins for the schedule that the Giants have faced. Taking out the Dallas Cowboys, which is the loss. So in the games they've won, 12 12 wins combined among those teams. And they have what? 3, 5. This is always good for podcasting, counting on air. 8, and then the Carolina Panthers, you throw them in there, 13, right? So below 500 record for the teams the Giants have beat. And it's like now there's 5 wins in there that came from the Giants, right? 5 losses for those teams that come from the New York Football Giants. But there is one piece of that where, again, you don't give any victories back, but the longer the season goes and the more that we look at these teams that they're taking on, you certainly start to say, right? You go, well, okay, the Tennessee Titans, maybe they're better than they looked that first week against us, and that's a quality win. Green Bay Packers, I mean, we thought, watch your backs, New York Jets. They're coming for you at home. Cut 2, what a disaster, right? So you always learn more about the other teams around the league as the season progresses. To your point, my answer, it's not a no, and I'm not trying to cop out here. It's too early. Because I'll know, and the worst part about this is you'll go and play the Jaguars. The next couple of weeks, I may not know anything. Seattle actually is a good one, just because Seattle is good. Like, this is the other thing that I'm doing too. I'm looking at the league, and all I'm saying is, well, guess what? You can tell me that the Seattle Seahawks weren't supposed to be good this year, but they're a 500 team. They've beaten some clubs. Now, their plus minus is in the negative, so maybe they're overachieving a little bit. So 2 more games from now, the Giants could be 7-1. And then I'll still be saying we may not know what this team is when it comes to playoff caliber football until we get a rematch against Dallas and they have Dak Prescott under center, until we get 2 games against Philadelphia and that team, right? Like, and then the Vikings, that's a good test. The Colts, even though they're a little muddled right now, right? The back end of this schedule is where I'm going to learn about if this team can win games in critical moments. Sorry, I take that back. They can win games in critical moments, but can they win against opposition that looks like they are high playoff caliber teams as well, right? And we just haven't, just the way the schedule breaks, we haven't had the chance to see that. And it doesn't take any of my confidence away. It's just hard for me to say this is a watch your back NFC championship game team right now.
Well, and if you look at the playoff picture, and currently as it sits, we mentioned some of that. Adam, right now, the Titans are the 3 seed in the AFC.
I know.
The Ravens are the 4 seed in the AFC. The Packers are tied for basically with the Rams for the last playoff spot at 3-3. It's like the Giants have beaten playoff caliber teams, but just because they play poorly against the Giants, people are like, I don't know, are they really that good? And it's like, well, why can't we just give credit to the Giants for causing those teams to look bad?
So let's ask let's have that question too, right? The one hand is that the teams don't look good against the Giants because the Giants are good, right? The Giants play well, and that makes you look bad. And they win time of possession, and that's a key factor. I think that they've done a really good job with that. It throws off other teams' offenses when they don't get out there as often. They don't get as many bites of the apple. We talked about this over the last couple of seasons, keeping the defense fresher. They put a lot of pressure on them in the first half of this game against the Ravens, and then balanced the books in the second half. Key, sustained drives for Daniel Jones, right? Needed it coming out after that muddled mess there in the third quarter, but needed some key drives there. Had one in the first half as well when it mattered most. So on the one hand, the Giants are a good team, and that's why they look bad against them. The other thing is like, I think universally, I would say right now, which is a pick it up, put it in your pocket for the Giants. The NFL is muddled. Like, maybe it's just the product of this is what the league is this year. There's a lot of teams that don't look so good, right? We all know that the Buffalo Bills and the Kansas City Chiefs, right? And hey, listen, and the New York Jets, like, these are quality teams around the league. The Chargers are probably going to get into form. Notice, those are teams in the AFC. Right now, when you look in the NFC, the Minnesota Vikings look like they are a part of the upper echelon group here. A lot of talent in our division, obviously. And then when you get to, even though the Atlanta Falcons, who, I said this yesterday, I'm going to say it again today. I'm going to say it every effing week, I think. They should be leading the division right now following that crap call against Tampa now 2 weeks ago. They should actually be a 4-2 team leading the division. And they're not particularly good. But I think we would talk about them like we talk about the Giants. Hey, they find ways to win football games, right? But Tampa Bay is not the same team right now. The Saints haven't been maybe as impressive as people thought. They've had a lot of injuries at the quarterback position. And then that NFC West, right? Arizona has been trash. Seattle, the Rams, hangover. It's a condition at this point for them, 3-3. And then San Francisco trying to like fight their way through a QB change after the injury, right? So, I just look at the landscape. All I know for sure is 6 weeks into the season, the New York Giants are one of the most consistent football teams. And if we're talking about contention and being a team that can be a threat, That matters. Are you consistent? The big thing for me over the next, say, 4 weeks here into the bye week and coming out before we get into those division battles is, can the Giants find a way to stop having the same game script? I love what they're doing in these games. I don't love that they keep trailing in games. They keep trailing at halftime. They keep trailing and coming into the third quarters. This game on Sunday was the latest that they took being behind and needing to make a comeback. They're succeeding at it, and I like having that. Now it's about, and this matters, can you play from ahead? Can you play with a lead? Can you pressure other teams? And arguably, that would be a chance for this defense to look even more dynamic when you give them a lead to protect, as opposed to having to tooth and nail battle your way back into these.
It is funny, though, because even though the Giants come out to these slow starts, it ends up being a positive because the coaches at halftime make adjustments to make the Giants look better. So it's like the team is making those adjustments to put themselves in a position to win. So yeah, you never want to be down double digits in the fourth quarter and having that consistently happen. The New York Giants have won 3 games where they were down double digits in the second half and have come back to win. Adam, the one thing I keep going back to is, going into the season, everyone does the same thing. You go down the entire schedule, right? And you're like, win, loss, win, loss. What's this number going to be? Nobody had the Giants at 5-1, right? No one.
No, nobody did. But finish your thought. Sorry, go ahead.
So my thought about this as I'm going through it is, I'm now looking at the other potential playoff teams, and like I said, I'm like, oh, we beat the Titans. Oh, we beat the Ravens. Like, oh, the Packers. Yeah, maybe they're not that good. They're still 500. Like, and it makes me think, on a neutral site, the Giants have me believing that they can compete in almost any game against almost any team. Now, I will say the Buffalo Bills, the Kansas City Chiefs, and I mean, the Eagles' run defense was a little suspect last night, but those are 3 teams where I'd say, okay, I understand we probably have to get a big turnover or flip the game script in order to win. You look at the rest of the teams in the NFL, there's not a single one on a neutral site where I'm like, oh, we got no shot today. And that wasn't the case 6 weeks ago when we went into the season. You're like, when we do that exercise, win, loss, win, loss. Yeah. Now you kind of sit there and say, there's only a handful of teams where I feel like the Giants would be an underdog on a neutral site.
Well, they'll be an underdog next week, early line against the Jaguars. Giants will be an underdog on the road, which is fine by me. But to your point, like, and I don't want to spend too much time on this, but like, I remember going back and we were saying, like, we're somewhere, I think 6 games. I think you said 6 wins. Maybe I said 7, but you said chance to win a couple. We both said a chance to win a couple more. I think 8 and 9 was like as high as we got, preseason on this team. And it was because when you went through there, these first 6 games, it was like, well, you could beat Carolina. Got to win that game. Got to beat Chicago. That's 2. And it was like, could you steal one? That Dallas game is really big. And we were hoping maybe you're 500 through that. And now these next 4 games, when we talked about this season, it was, and then you have to go beat these 4 teams. And by and large, maybe outside of Seattle, Jacksonville's certainly a better team this year. This still looks the same way. You better go win these games. We earmarked these 4 games as being, it's tough in the NFL, got to at least go 3-1 here. So maybe now we do need to elevate, say, maybe you just have to go undefeated. You're on a 3-game win streak. You have to keep it rolling here because you want to stack up those wins and prepare for those challenges on the back half. The other thing then for me that I wanted to set the table for here is now, potentially, we're not going to get into this today, but a little teaser for coming up is, what do the Giants want to accomplish now over these next couple of weeks before their bye, as some teams, unfortunately, see, this is the tricky part. On the one hand, the Giants are playing well and they're 5-1, and they may want to make little tweaks. How can you improve? Are we going to stand pat and wait for Kadarius Toney to come back? Is Kenny Golladay coming back? Is he going to be a part of this team or not? Defensively, what do you need to maybe add? What was it? Klein had a bad hit out of bounds that actually helped the New York Football Giants on a punt return, which was a beautiful moment for us. Everyone was healthy afterwards. Cost him. He was on our practice squad, picked up by Baltimore. Will the Giants go out to the market and make moves? It's hard because not really anyone is technically out of it right now in that playoff picture in the NFC. So I don't know if there's going to be a lot of sellers. This next week number 7, is kind of critical for who wins or who loses in the NFL, because based on that, especially around the league, you can look around and say teams like New England, oh my God, having that shutout, it was shocking. But a team like the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Houston Texans, the Raiders, Obviously, the Commanders be a tight one. The Detroit Lions, the Carolina Panthers, those two last teams specifically, those are guys that look like they're in the dumpster. There are players that the Giants could take a look at to improve this roster at low-cost margins. I know everyone's saying, go get DJ Moore. That's one thing that I'll dispel for you right now. He's expensive as all get out, and I don't think the Giants are going to commit that in this moment right now for a player like that, even though he may be dynamic and he could be a big component. You got to find ways to manage the checkbook here and improve this team. Interesting to think about. Are there possibilities for the Giants to do so?
Adam.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, my
friend, boy.
At the end of the day, who would have thought 6 games in, we would be talking about the Giants being a potential buyer before the trade deadline, as opposed to how do we continue this rebuild and sell off assets for the future? Well, I hand up, just like you. I'm the first one here to admit I never expected this type of play from this team this fast. And guess what? It feels good to be on the wrong side of that one. We obviously thought, as you mentioned, 6, 7, maybe 8 wins if things break the right way. Right now, they look like they're going to be sailing past that. And yes, it is time for Joe Schoen to start considering, are we 1 or 2 pieces away from getting even better in some areas that we know we need to shore up?
Yeah, if you can say winning a playoff game, right? That's winning a wild card playoff game, right? If you think that there are moves that can achieve that goal, you have to find a way to go do it. Obviously, we're not talking about mortgage in the future, but there are viable assets out there. So we're going to talk about the wide receiver position, talk about the cornerback position, maybe talk about inside linebacker as well. Little areas that the Giants can look to improve. Other way you can improve, just get healthy. That doesn't hurt either. So a couple of weeks away from the bye, we'll see how that all shakes out. We have a lot still to talk about from this game, snap counts to break down, and then as we always say, Brian Daboll told us to turn the page and start focusing on the Jacksonville Jaguars. We're going to do the same thing. We always appreciate everyone coming in and being a part of the live streams over on YouTube. Get that podcast wherever you get those needs fulfilled. We're back again tomorrow, breaking it all down. And as Andy Makowitz would want, need, and nay, demand the people know.
As always, let's go Big Blue.